element working at a place like this. That much was obvious. As if she sensed him, she lifted her head and met his gaze. Even from the distance and without adequate lighting, he could make out the startling blue of her eyes. He would never be able to forget when she had looked up at him that night in the underground, the crowd intense, the scent of blood filling the air. He'd ripped those men away from her as she appeared scared. When Adrian had heard her scream, even with the noise surrounding them and the blood rushing to his ears as he faced off with his opponent in the cage, every protective instinct inside of him had gone on high alert. Memories had assaulted him, and tunnel vision had taken over. He'd had one goal in mind: get to her. When Cash had joined in, the two cage fighters had made quick work of the drunken bystanders. It had been a very long time since he'd felt any emotions for the opposite sex, but the bone-deep protective instincts that had slammed into him as she had looked up at him, silently begging for his help, had broken something inside of him. Brea, he'd found out, was her name. It sounded sweet and innocent. The walls he'd built around himself, especially his heart, had cracked at that moment. Never had he experienced such a strong reaction to a woman, and never so instantaneously. His heart had started beating again, his blood rushing through his veins. He'd felt alive. It had been weeks since that night, and despite his inner pep talks that he needed to stay away from her, that he was damaged goods and she didn't need that in her life, he found himself frequenting the club where she worked, if only to see her. He didn't miss the way women stared at him, ones who had been to the underground cage fighting right below this club. They wanted him for the sole reason that he fought. It turned them on. How would they feel if they knew he fought to release his emotions, to experience something other than the tightness that squeezed at his heart? How would they feel to know he enjoyed giving pain as much as he relished receiving it while in that cage? He needed to stay away from Brea, but whatever it was about her, Adrian found the more he saw her, the more he wanted her. It was a dangerous combination, and one he shouldn't even be contemplating. But when it came to her, something in him shifted, and he found himself growing possessive and territorial of her. He found himself wanting her as only his. Chapter 2. Brea watched Adrian leave. Even after his massive body disappeared in the crowd, her heart still pounded wildly. Every night she saw him sitting on the same bar stool, slamming back the whiskey like it was water and he was dying of thirst. He wasn't like other men. There was a threatening aura that surrounded him, not just on the outside, not just because he fought underground. No, there was something deep down inside of him, something that called out to the broken piece of her she tried to keep buried. When she'd been offered a chance to earn a hefty amount under the table working the floor during the illegal cage fights they held under the club, she'd been leery, but hadn't even thought of turning it down. Brea needed the money desperately, and working the fights meant she was one step closer to being stable. She kept to herself for a reason, a good one. But she also couldn't deny the fact that the money that had been offered would go a long way in securing her release from her personal prison. Every little bit brought her closer to escaping the nightmare that had become her life. So, against her better judgment and all the internal warning bells that had gone off inside of her, Brea had accepted. It hadn't been until she was crammed into the basement, sweaty, drunken bodies pressed far too close for her comfort, that the past assaulted her. She could have handled it, was doing a good job, too. But when the numerous hands had started touching her, forcibly pulling at her, everything around Brea had gone black.